let me just give a quick overview of where we are and why MCCA is involved in this. Apologize for the technical difficulties. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Baldwin. I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Center for Student Success. And one of our overarching goals of the Center for Student Success is to enhance the use of data to inform decisions about improving student outcomes. And so the discussion about the VFA has been one that's been ongoing from our perspective at the center and the larger association. I want to give you a little bit of context about how we got to this point. We've had several discussions over the last really 2 years with the presidents about the VFA, and the discussion got more pointed this past summer when the presidents met at their summer institute in Traverse City. We had Kent Philippi from AACC and some other individuals come and talk with the presidents about what the VFA was, how it can be used, and most pointedly, how it can be of value to an individual institution. I'm going to talk in a minute about the overarching value to a set of institutions and us as a state, but really we've focused an awful lot on using the benchmarking power behind the VFA and being able to compare your peers. So the discussion in July was really around that, and we had the president of Salt Lake City Community College was with us, and she talked about their experience. And we also had and in the discussions, it was very clear from the dialogue there for the presidents in July that they wanted to move forward with a conversation about a collaborative approach to this because there was enough of interest in the room to think about that. So fast forward a little bit to October, we had a second discussion with the presidents more pointedly about a consortium around joining the VFA and realizing a discount. And in our view, that's certainly valuable in that it will cost you less to participate because of the consortium. But there are much broader values that we see that the VFA could bring to us over time. And so some of the things I just want to hit real quick about in terms of those value, and I think Bernadette and others at AACC will highlight these points as well, is that we really want to leverage these data points which are built for community colleges, by community colleges, to inform the public, inform legislators, inform our constituencies about the good things that are going on at community colleges with consistent data that is representative of what your mission is. And so we have interest in further discussions about how we leverage the VFA. We've got, as of today, we've got 27 of the 28 colleges have indicated that they will sign on to the consortium. And so how can we start to utilize these metrics to perhaps replace other metrics that you're required to report as institutions and really use them in a way to facilitate discussion. So I want to stop there and we'll come back to some of these pieces as we go through the webinar. But I also want to highlight that we stand ready to support your involvement in this effort. And Gail Ives, who many of you know, there we go. Sorry, I was muted for a second. Gail Ives is a former IR director at Mott Community College and project director for us on this project, and she's been working with us on a variety of things, and she is going to be a point of contact on our side from a state perspective on this. We also are planning to do a number of other either events or webinars in the coming months as you prepare to work on the VFA, data submission, and ultimately its use. Most pointedly, we're planning to do a meeting on January 22nd from 1 to 4 p.m. in Lansing to really have a discussion about the challenges folks are running into or questions that they have about working with the VFA. So I'm going to stop there and turn it back to my colleagues at AACC so that they can walk you through an overview of the VFA, and then we can get into some Q&A as we go. But I want to say thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to the discussion. So, Bernadette, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chris, for that. I'm going to give really brief welcome remarks again before I just do a brief overview of the agenda that you see on the screen because of the audio difficulty we had when we first started. The webinar today will be recorded, is being recorded, so just be aware of that. Because of that, we muted all of your telephone lines. You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question, so we can unmute your line and you can ask that question, or you can type in your question on the webinar panel and go from there. When this presentation is over, we'll have the recording link sent to you at the email address at which you registered. So just keep that in mind. If you happen to register at a personal email address, that's the contact information we have for you, and that's what we'll be sending the recording link. The slides will also be available when we send you the follow-up information. And then with that, what you have on the screen in front of you is the agenda for what we're going to do today. So we're going to give an overview of the VFA. Even though there's the most bullet points there, it will be a brief overview highlighting each of the areas that you see before you. And then we're going to go into a review of the VFA cohorts and measures. And then finally finish up with talking about supporting the VFA colleges and next steps, which Chris just alluded to in his opening remarks, your upcoming meeting and some things that AACC has planned for the VFA user community. So why and how the VFA was developed. The tagline for VFA, for community colleges, by community colleges, is really not just the tagline, but the premise upon which the system was built. VFA was for community colleges, first ever national system to measure how two-year colleges specifically perform in serving our more than 13 million students. And so the VFA measure is designed to encompass the full breadth of the community college mission and the diversity of students' goals and educational experiences. The by community colleges refers to the fact that the VFA was developed through 18 months of intensive research and testing by community college presidents, a lot of institutional research folks and practitioners, and trustees and governing boards that really know data and understand our institutions and our students. So I put a little bit of question up in front of you, and I'm going to launch a poll and would ask that you respond to the poll. This is just a brief exercise and a very brief one-question poll. Based on federal data collection, what is the community college completion rate? Across the sector, that is. Okay. So we have 100% of you have responded, and I think there's a way to show poll results. Okay, so 71% of you chose. So 71% of you chose answer A, 20%. 29% of you chose answer B, 33%. And 0% of you chose answer C, 42%. It's kind of a quick trick question. The answer is all of the above. And I know I didn't provide that to you, so we're not going to hold you accountable for your responses. And this is why. A, the 20% refers to the 3-year graduation rate. B, the 33% refers to the 4-year graduation rate. And the 42% refers to the 3-year graduation rate inclusive of transfer. The point here is that the way you define things really matters. And VFA was designed to come up with measures and performance indicators that gave a better, more appropriate way to measure what our colleges were doing. Something that was mission aligned, sector appropriate, and last but certainly not least, useful to our colleges. So we had in initial development working groups comprised of more than 60 of the professionals that I told you about, in addition to a steering committee who set out to determine the best ways to measure our colleges. And they moved from a conceptual framework trying to answer that question, what do we want to capture? What is important to capture? What is telling about our colleges and our sector? And from there, they moved to operationalizing that definition. And as IR professionals and people in the community college space, we know that the devils are in the details. So moving from the concept to the operational definitions required running a lot of data, culling information from other initiatives that were out there, work that was being done in Achieving the Dream with the Cross-State Data Initiative, work that was being done on campuses, work from our accrediting bodies. And so they took all that information and they ran a lot of numbers, and they met very often. They worked really hard to come up with measures in 3 broad areas. And so the VFA covers student progress and outcomes, career and technical education, and ABE right now. What you're looking at this ad on the screen in front of you is just a snapshot of the 6-year outcomes. And again, the measures gauge everything from pre-collegiate work, such as developmental education, on through student progress and outcomes. We'll go into detail later, but this is just some high-level concepts and intents behind these measures. Some ways that we think the measures are improved upon what we're traditionally used to reporting is that with the student progress and outcomes measures and the 6-year outcomes, we're looking at all outcomes for our students, and we're not predefining what is success. And the reason that's important is because we want institutions to be able to say, what do these measures say about our college? What is our mission? Are we a heavily career and tech-oriented mission institution, and therefore our certificates and our CTE education is an area of focus for us, and we want to hone in on that? Are we a more liberal or transfer-based institution? So we really want to look at our transfer and our students' transfer behavior. It's not telling you that you are a graduation rate and solely a graduation rate, but in theory tries to look at all of your students. And that brings up what you're seeing on the screen in front of you are the cohort types within the VFA. That was also a very important concept or intent behind that. We wanted the VFA to be inclusive of more students, so not just your full-time, fall-entering, first-time in college student, as we're used to reporting, but also students who are the first time at your college. And then the sub-cohorts from that, credential seeking and first time in college, sort of break down and look at what happens to your student outcomes based on the population that you're looking at. So again, just trying to give you an idea of sort of the higher level thinking, the conceptual thinking that went into creating measures that in many ways were more useful or better than the traditional measures that our colleges report. Same thing with, I have a graphic of CTE, but again, we're going to get into these in more detail a little bit later on. But with CTE, the whole non-credit area, a big black hole for many of our institutions, but as you know, very important for what we do. All of our workforce outcomes both in the credit and non-credit area. And so with that, the overarching objective was to create a system and give community colleges a framework and a model so that we could leverage our measures better. And I'm going to pass the baton over to Ken to talk about how we want VFA to be leveraged and how we think it can be leveraged and how we're seeing institutions use the VFA measures.
Good morning, everybody, and certainly Chris talked a little bit about this at the beginning, and I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, but we see that colleges are going to be able to use the VFA in a variety of different ways, both at the local, state, and then at the national level, federal level. Here at AACC, we're very interested in the federal level. I'll talk a little bit about that. But we think that there's a lot of utility in being able to use this institutional data across a variety of different settings. And we know some people, even before the VFA was fully launched as a data collection and display tool, colleges were starting to use that. For example, Oxnard College out in California, they've used the measures from the VFA in a variety of ways, and they've found it very useful for looking at these data to have conversations inside their institutions to focus on different topical areas. For example, they look at all the measures and do a scorecard on all of them, and then they use it with the administrative staff as well as the faculty to have conversations about how are we doing on these areas, how well are we doing with this, and it sets up a great opportunity for the president to have conversations across his organization about where are areas that they may need to look at, to focus on, and give them some data to help them zero in on areas to look at and focus on. Then at the state level, some examples are Pennsylvania, as a state system, has started using these measures statewide. And they, at their state association, have actually brought the data into their state association and use it for a variety of purposes. Some of them to help the colleges be more successful, but also from an advocacy perspective when they went to their congressional staffers and people who are doing the legislative work to say, here's some measures that look at our colleges. Let's look and see where our colleges are doing well and talk about the data that's more appropriate for community colleges. We're talking about how we're doing with our colleges. So the opportunity to use the data for a statewide system association is very useful. And Chris, I'm sure, may have some thoughts on this. And as you're going forward with your work in Michigan, it's going to be an area you probably want to have a continuing conversation about this. The other piece, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is that at the institutional level, you're going to be able to look at your data and compare it with other institutions. It'll be important to be able to compare yourself with institutions within Michigan because you have the whole Michigan colleges doing that. But there are some times when there's colleges within your state, you don't really have a comparison that's appropriate to look at within your state. And that's where a national benchmarking project is useful because you'll be able to look at your data relative to other data, not just within your state, but across the state lines, with data that are defined the same way. And Bernadette alluded to this earlier with the stacked bar charts about the being disaggregated outcomes in a variety of different ways. That's useful because you want to define what outcomes are appropriate for you, and you can take those and put them together in ways that are meaningful for you, recognizing that other colleges in other areas may be defining those with maybe different missions, but the definition behind all those separate elements are defined the same. So you'll be able to compare yourself appropriately with similar institutions across the country. And then finally, on a national level, we're using the VFA in a variety of ways to leverage the power of community colleges. Many of you may know that the Department of Education is trying to create new outcomes measures for higher education in the IPEDS data system. AACC has been very strong in advocating for aligning these measures with the VFA. We're haven't seen the final IPEDS guidelines yet, but we're working very hard to see that those are going to be, to the extent possible, aligned with VFA. And we think that we're going to have some good success there with that. We're also working with people like the Computer College America and other national organizations to try and move them towards adopting measures that are similar with the VFA. And then finally, and we'll get into this a little bit also when we talk about the CTE measures, we know that there's a lot of challenges many colleges getting the data for outcomes, particularly wages for colleges, for students who leave their colleges. We see this as a very important tool for advocating for our colleges at a national and federal advocacy level to say, help our colleges get better data to be able to track their students once they leave their institution and know how well they're doing, both from the wage outcomes perspective, but also from the transfer outcome perspective. We think it's very important for colleges to be able to have a better understanding of where their students go and what happens to them. And we see the VFA and the more colleges participating in enhancing our ability to give that outreach and advocacy purposes for doing that.
And Kent, this is Chris. I just want to chime in just briefly on the point you just made. We had a very pointed discussion with the presidents about doing precisely that. All of our institutions are anxious to get a hold of labor market data and wage data, and we intend to use our collective activity with the VFA as a leverage point to get a hold of that and argue that, look, we can't do these kinds of things if we don't have that data. So thanks for raising that.
Yeah, it's a very important federal advocacy issue for us as well. We've heard it loud and clear from our colleges, and we know in many states the ability to Sometimes it happens at the state level. It then doesn't flow back down to the colleges. In places like Michigan, where you don't have a strong centralized governance structure, it's oftentimes one institution at a time or not at all. And we understand that. We're working very hard to help colleges like yours in your state to get better access to that data.
And before we move on to away from Ken's explanation and move on to the next part of the presentation, I do, especially because we did have a lot of audio difficulty in the beginning, I do see a hand raised out in the audience. I think it's from earlier on, but I do want to give folks a chance to raise their hand or ask any questions at this point, especially if you were trying to earlier and didn't get the opportunity. So again, you can unmute your line. Okay, Nancy, I see you, and I'm unmuting you. You should be good to go. Nancy? We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just had a question about the name of the community college that Kent mentioned initially that was using the data internally and having discussions.
Yeah, it was Oxnard College. Other colleges that have been using it, I have Salt Lake City is using it. Maricopa has been using it. There's a number of colleges out there who are using it. I just know Oxford a little bit better because their president has presented a couple times with us.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and to that point, this is Chris again. We have several beta testing colleges in Michigan that have been working a little bit longer with the VFA. Jackson, in particular, has been at this for some time, and we hope to leverage their great experience about not only getting involved in submitting data, but also how they're planning to use the data and what they're doing with it internally. And we'll definitely be facilitating discussions around those points and taking advantage of the experience of your peers right here in Michigan.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. So with that, we're going to move on to the next part of the presentation.
Alrighty. So now that you know why it was created and how colleges are using it, I just wanted to switch gears a little bit and bring you to the website. Hopefully a lot of you have already been to the website and have seen it. The address is right here at the top of your screen. It's vfa.aacc.nche.edu. Okay. So any of you who have not used it, I'm just minimizing things. So anybody who has not joined yet, this is going to be your portal. In order to join, you can click the button right here. And as you may know, everybody in Michigan is joining as a college member. So this button, college members continue here. This will be your pathway in order to start that join process. In addition to joining on the website, we have really useful information. So I just brought you to the membership page. And if you can see at the top of the screen as well as the left side, we have mirrored toolbars just to make it easy for you to navigate. We have about membership types, and as I said, all of you should be college members. And on the bottom, we have more useful information. I want to direct you over here to the right with our Year 1 schedule. So we really encourage everybody to join by February 28th, and that's when the primary sign-up period closes. And by joining by February 28th, you should have time in order to collect and enter your data by the March 14th deadline for submission. So if you have any questions about that, you can let us know, but it's right here on the membership page. In addition, so our Year 1 goes from November 1st to October, from November 1st to October 31st, 2014. And so just to let you know, so you're signing up for VFA for the entire year. On the left-hand side gives you a little bit of information about our fees. So it is, all the fees are based on an adjusted enrollment band, and that's just the number of schools in your college. And that is based on IPEDS data.
Don, this is Chris. Just real quick, everyone should know this by now, but as part of the consortial arrangement for the Michigan colleges, we're realizing a 30% discount. We had shared some calculations based on the AACC's formula with the presidents and accounted for that 30% discount. But so if you have any questions about whether or not that discount has been applied or things like that, I would encourage you to connect with AACC. But we definitely are realizing a 30% discount because of the group coming in together. So.
And everything Dawn just went over in the join process, the online portion of that, there are step-by-step instructions in the email that was sent to you from Chris. So it walks you through the same process that we just showed you here, but it also gives you that discount code for the 30%. So if you missed any of that or you're trying to write it down and didn't get it, just refer to that email.
Alrighty. So once you have joined, it's important to know that you'll be part of our participant list, which can be found under this Find VFA Colleges. So you can either look at the entire participant list, or you can search for either a particular institution or a city or a state. So just for fun, I'm going to search for Michigan. And each college that has joined has a profile over here. So you can look at one of the profiles. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see just general information about the institution, the location, the urbanicity, excuse me, sorry. And on the right-hand side is just general demographic data about your college, which is also pulled from iPads. Once you have published data, there will be a button right here to see your outcomes, the public-facing outcomes. In addition to the profile here, you'll have access to the My Account page, but first we need to log on. So I'm just going to log in as me. And this is the same information as your AACC login. And then you'll have the welcome bar will change, and you can go to My Account. So I just wanted to go over this My Account screen a little bit. You can see that there's 4 main sections. On the left-hand side is the VFA key contact information. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. So the key contact is very important. It's the main point of contact between the VFA and your institution. So we're going to be sending most of the emails out and really expecting the key contact to share that information to those who need it. So this person is usually the head or the director of the IR. They are able to input data as well as approve and publish data, and they have one other special privilege, and that is to assign roles to other people at the institution. So the other roles are the data administrators, and those are one step below the key contacts. And they are able to input the data, approve, and publish the data. They just cannot assign roles. And finally, one step below that are the data inputters, and they are able to view, enter, review, and submit data for approval, but they cannot approve the data or publish the data. So let's go back to the My Account page. So this is the page that you would, that last page is where you would assign other people roles. So Bernadette's going to be talking about these other 3 areas in just a second, but very briefly, it's the VFA data input. This is where you'd be inputting the data. The VFA data dashboards, where you can see your outcomes and your benchmarking dashboards. And on the bottom is just a couple of resources to help you get started. So with that, I'll pass it off to Bernadette.
So John just showed you how to navigate to and from different areas of the website. So hopefully you've signed up, and if you were wondering, okay, what do I do now, that should answer the question. You go to the website with your account access, you have access to these different areas and these different functions. I'm going to go a level deeper into the actual mechanics of data entry. Again, the My Account pages available in many different ways from the website. Up here at the top navigation in your welcome control area once you are logged in, and then on some pages also in the left-hand menu, gets you your gateway into this, into your data input. So we're going to go into the VFA data input area and, again, talk about sort of how you get started here and what the process will be. Once you're in the input data area, you have the tabs in front of you that walk you through the different areas of measures, which we'll be going into in detail. And you have a second option to do your data, which is a VFA bulk upload. The bulk upload file allows you to take information out of your on-campus systems, populate the bulk upload file, and then upload that file into the system. Once that file is uploaded, you will be able to see your data in the manual online data entry form. So it's being housed in the same database and can be shown to you in the online forms after you do the bulk upload. It's just that certain folks prefer to write data right from their ERPs or their on-campus systems into the file and upload it rather than manually enter the data. If you do choose to go the route of manually entering the data, though, this is the way you start that process. For instance, under the 2-year cohort, if you hit Enter Data, what loads are the data entry forms. Initial loading of the forms, you've got to give it a second. It's pulling in all the forms and all the information that you might already have in there. But once they load, you'll be able to see that it's just straight entry into the forms of your cohort information, and then, of course, the counts of your metrics. From there, you would walk through and calculate and validate your information, save your information. Continue walks you through each of these forms on the right-hand side, or you can jump around and use the forms on the right-hand side by navigating to them. Your cohort information, once you enter your cohort information, does carry over into the subsequent forms. So logically, I'm sure you've all done data as you understand. Setting up your cohorts and having that information should be the first step. And then the forms will be pre-populated with the cohort information for you. Preview would take you to your dashboard. So once you've entered data and that data can be rendered into dashboard views, Preview will take you to that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And then Print gives you the option to actually print the forms that you're seeing on the page. That was a function that we added after beta testing a little bit. Folks like to have a hard copy of what they entered. There is another way, though, to get a file version or a hard copy of what you entered. If you go back to the landing page, the entry landing page, there is this VFA bulk download option. So again, 2 formats which you can capture and sort of save the information that you've entered or uploaded. You can print your screens, or you can actually download your information back into a CSV file. So you have that kind of historical capture of the information you've uploaded. In addition to, once you have data entered, either by doing it in the online entry forms or doing the bulk upload file, your workflow is such that you can preview your information. Again, this takes you to the dashboards that are rendered from your data. You can complete your data input. So once that's completed, this button here on the right, the Data Approved Publish, becomes enabled to those who have the ability or the access, the level of access they need to approve the data. So that would be your data administrators or your key contacts. Data inputters would not have the ability to say data approved and published. This status of your data appears both on your landing page here and also appears on your dashboards. I'll be showing that and tells you what is the status. Is your data still in preview and you're doing your data entry? Is your data in preview but your data entry is complete? Or the third state, your data entry is complete and it's been approved and it's been published. Once you do have data entered, the dashboard area becomes active. And from there, you can go and preview your data dashboard. Again, the first time you render your data dashboard, it is pulling all of the information that you've entered from multiple forms. I believe at last count there was close to 1,000 fields in there. So this will take a bit, could take up to a few minutes to render. We usually get a rendering in about 30 to 45 seconds, depending on the system you're on and what's going on with your data. And once your once your outcomes dashboard renders and it's in the state that it's been approved for publishing, it's this outcomes dashboard that then becomes viewable to the public. So your outcomes dashboard, including all the different areas and the different views that are captured in it, is the dashboard that the public will see from your college profile page, the profile page that Dawn showed you earlier. There'll be a big button that says, View My VFA dashboard, and this is the dashboard that the public will come to. Again, it's only when your data has been approved and the status up here, data entry in progress, changes to data entry approved. That is why it's really important, not only for you to sign up as quickly as possible so that you can learn the metrics and do the metrics and get your data entered, but also so that you have enough time to review your data and it's not a rush job and you get to internally look it over and use it before you're publishing it. But without getting your data in the system, the benchmarking utility, which we're going to talk about next, becomes less and less useful. So really important to try to adhere to the deadlines that are set. Of course, I'm sure you know that from doing other data initiatives. Again, real briefly, the outcomes dashboard walks you through views of developmental education. If you were beta testing, your beta data will be in here, or your current year collection, which is 2013-2014. For our VFA Community College, we have data, both beta data in here and 2013-2014, which is year one, the current year we're in. And that's your outcomes dashboard. Now the other dashboard we've been alluding to is the benchmarking dashboard. Benchmarking, when we're doing our market research and talking about building and creating the VFA, this is one of the functions and the utility that was most important, ranked as most important to our IR community, and something that we spent a lot of time thinking about. I'm just going to show you briefly. We're not going to run through a full demonstration of the data, but I did want to point out to point you to the functionality of the benchmarking dashboard more than anything else. So again, when you have data in here, these will all change to drop-down menus. What you're seeing on the left-hand side of the page is information on your institution. What you're seeing on the right-hand side of the page is the data rendered from your peer group. And you would select your peer group based on these factors. This is, again, showing you your institution, and then on the right-hand side, the peer group's institution.
I just wanted to chime in here to reinforce something Bernadette had alluded to earlier, is that in order to get the maximum functionality in any benchmarking, we need lots of colleges to have data in there. And the more colleges we get data in there, the more colleges you'll have to select when you drill down into finer and finer groupings of institutions. We also know that this is a starting point for selecting peer institutions, and as we go forward in the VFA in the future years, we hope to continue to refine the ability to get the peers that institutions want to have for their peers. At the present, we don't have the ability to select by institution, just by institutional characteristics, but as we go forward, that's something we may look into as we go forward.
Very important. And then the last thing I'll point out to you, probably the most important in terms of really getting started, are the resources available not only on your My Account page, but certainly in the Data Help Center. And this Data Help Center link exists on every page, either in the top navigation here or on the right-hand side with this big button under your welcome controls. And in the Data Help Center, you'll find the real resources you need to actually do the VFA. And the first and foremost, that's the VFA Metrics Manual. The Metrics Manual operationally defines every denominator, every numerator, and the specifics of the cohort, cohort exclusions. We've done a lot of work based on feedback from our betas, especially feedback from an earlier group, our pilot testers, on this manual and its format and clarifications and instructional material. It is always a work in progress, though. So it's really important that the people who are using the manual, if things aren't making sense or things can be clearer, that we hear about it. The current state that the manual is in is vastly improved, and that is only because we heard loud and clear from those using it what needed to be in here and how it needed to be organized. So for us, when we don't do data, we don't sit down with college information, aside from fake information that we can just make up, we don't get that intimate view of, like, I'm doing my work and how is this working. It's really, again, really important to hear from you. And so those 65 pages in the manual walks you through every detail of the cohorts and the measures. Also, what we found to be, surprisingly, what we found to be a helpful resource to a lot of people are the VFA overview data templates. These were templates that we used during pilot testing of the measure. That was before we had any online system, and so we asked institutions to submit their data in these templates. And what happened was these templates really became a first point of reference for folks as they do the VFA, or as they ask, what is all included in this and what am I getting myself into, so to speak. So these data templates show you every measure and literally every field that we're collecting in VFA data. People like to oftentimes start here, especially when they're working with their IT or IR offices on campus to determine what are these queries and polls going to look like so I can get my VFA data out of my college's system. Again, I'm going to just do a quick glance, make sure there's no questions. I would encourage you at this point to ask any questions sort of about the mechanics or the logistics of what we just went over. Our next part of the presentation, we're going to do a much deeper review of the actual cohorts and measures. So I know a ton of the things I referred to probably, especially if you've never done the VFA, are new, and there are going to be IR-type questions there. But we are going to go over them next. Okay. So with that, we'll go back to our presentation. And talk about the VFA cohorts and then the measures. For the student progress and outcomes area, this is inclusive of developmental education, 2-year progress and outcomes, and your 6-year outcomes. The VFA collects data on 2 cohort years, your 6-year cohort and your 2-year cohort. And just as their name implies, the 6-year cohort are students who entered your institution 6 years ago. So for year 1, that's fall of 2007. The 2-year cohort are students that entered your institution 2 years ago. For our first year of data collection, that is fall 2011. each of the cohort years, so your big cohort years, are then broken down into cohort types. Your main VFA cohort, your credential-seeking cohort, and your first-time in college cohort. This is a really simple kind of visual of what I just explained. Again, your 6-year cohort and your 2-year cohort, both are broken down into the main VFA cohort, your credential-seeking cohort, and your first-time in college cohort. The main VFA cohort is different than, let's say, an IPEDS cohort because it's all students that entered your institution for the first time, whereas the first-time in college cohort is your more traditional definition of students who are the first time in post-secondary education. We added the first-time in college sub-cohort to be parallel to what you are reporting for IPEDS and sort of look at the differences between the cohort types in terms of outcomes. That cohort in the center there, the credential-seeking cohort type, is defined by VFA behaviorally. What we mean by that is it's your students who, at the end of 2 years, have earned 12 credits. And those credits are inclusive of developmental education credits and previously earned credits of which your institution is aware. The rationale or the intent behind this measure is to get away from students' stated intents of I'm here to earn an award or credential. We all know the pitfalls with that. And to look at a student's behavior and make a determination as to whether that student is there to earn some sort of credential. And again, this is one of the areas where our working groups ran a lot of numbers and looked at this in detail. And some states have used other benchmarks or parameters in this area, criteria. We landed on the 12 earned credits at the end of 2 years because of what the numbers showed and how it showed. For each of the cohort years and then the cohort types that you're seeing, we also disaggregate by 6 factors. VFA disaggregates by in 6 categories. Enrollment status, which is your part-time, full-time, age, gender, race, ethnicity, which are parallel to the new IPEDS race ethnicity categories, college ready versus not college ready, and Pell status, what your Pell status is at any time over your 6-year or 2-year time frame. So again, the first area of measures, if you think about VFA in a linear way, are the developmental education progress measures. And the idea is to look at students who showed a developmental need or referred to developmental education, and did they make it through developmental education, and were they successful in their first level college course in their developmental need area. Some of the nuances here that I'll mention, especially for the IR folks on the phone, a couple of things. The referred, that definition of referred, which is, do you have a placement test or do you have a referral on record for that student, is a challenge, especially when you're looking at a institution, a cohort from 6 years back. Some institutions didn't have a referral on record. What they did have was the student's course-taking behavior. So they knew that they took a developmental education course. And we found this to be an issue enough of a time where we made an accommodation within reporting the VFA. There is currently a flag inside the reporting framework that lets you say whether this is a referred population or whether you didn't have a referral on record for the student, so this is by course-taking behavior, the student was in developmental education. We wanted to stay true to the intent behind the measure, and we felt it was important to preserve the referral and the definition and good referral practices and follow that population, but we understand that hopefully the data will get better, but at this point there are lots of institutions that just don't have the referral on record.
And this was one of the few areas in beta testing where we really had a real challenge with coming up with a consistent measure that would work for every college across the country. Our preference is to collect referred status. The rationale behind that is, of those students who are not deemed college ready, how is your institution doing? So we want to have that referral status. The enrollment status, may mean that you're missing some of those students who were referred but didn't ever enroll, so they may have fallen through the cracks even before they get there. That's important, we think, from a measurement perspective to try and capture those students. We also recognize the challenge with getting that for some institutions, so we chose to give that accommodation for those who couldn't, but we want to make sure that it's clearly marked into the record so that people using the data would know how people are responding to these items.
And what you see in front of you is just a dashboard view of the developmental education progress measures. So each of the metrics on that left-hand chart for the different cohort types, and then the distribution of developmental need. Distribution of developmental need is something that we had included as contextual information from early on, and it is over your need population that these metrics are being calculated. The next area of measures under student progress and outcomes are your 2-year progress and outcomes measures. Again, a more, how are my students doing after 2 years? Have they reached certain progress points, or, as used in the language, say momentum points, or indicators that they're going to go on and be successful in certain outcomes? I'll point out here that the first 2 metrics you see on the screen, the first and the last metric you see on the screen, the percent of credit hours successfully completed, is your average. It's not a per student-based measure. It's credit hours by your cohort over successfully completed credit hours of your entire cohort over credit hours by your entire cohort. So it's not a student-based metric, so to speak. We've gotten lots of that question a lot of times, so I'd like to point that out. And then percent of students who reach credit thresholds, both your part-time population and your full-time population, and percent of students who are retained from fall to their next academic term. That second to last bullet are your 2-year outcomes, which are also totaled within the VFA framework, so you get a overall percentage of these outcomes. And your 2-year outcomes, not surprisingly, include completion of a certificate or degree by the end of those 2 years, transferred to a 2-year or 4-year institution, or is still enrolled at your institution. So it's giving you a snapshot of where those students were, where your cohort was at that 2-year mark. And again, what you see in front of you is the dashboard view for your 2-year progress and outcomes measures. And then last but certainly not least, we have your student progress and outcomes, or your 6-year outcomes measures. Again, the idea here being, what are the outcomes of all my students? What are all the potential outcomes, and where do each of these students fall within those buckets and those categories? There are 9 outcomes. The 9th outcome was just added as a result of beta testing and feedback from beta testing. Lots of our institutions are awarding bachelor's degree. That's not something new, but the frequency of it is certainly increasing. So we added a 9th category, receipt of the bachelor's degree. In the manual, Kent has actually created a nice inclusion, exclusion, like how do you place your students within these outcomes? The outcomes are intended to be mutually exclusive and hierarchical. So there is a logic or a flow to where you're placing these students within these categories. And then again, not to be repetitive, but the idea is that if you award a lot of certificates, you can look at your certificates and use it as a basis of inquiry for how am I doing in this area and what do I have to delve deeper into. If you have a lot of transfer, are my transfer policies supporting student success and positive outcomes? And the nice thing, again, about comparing your cohorts side by side is you can see, based on your different student characteristics, like the makeup of your cohort, how the outcomes compare to one another. CTE and ABE, student tracking cohorts, we separate this area of measures from student progress and outcomes, again, developmental education, 2-year progress and outcomes, 6-year outcomes, because it's a different method for tracking students. With your student progress and outcomes measures, you took a population of students from 6 years ago or 2 years ago, and you followed them through their academic pathway to see what their outcomes were after a certain time frame. With CTE and ABE-GED population, what you're doing is you're taking those students who had a CTE or ABE experience, education, and you're looking at what happens to them upon exiting the institution. So you'll see as you get into the metrics, the CTE completers and leavers. Cohort is our terminology for those students who either graduated formally with a award or a certificate, or left the institution with a CTE or ABE experience. So that's what we mean when we say CTE completers and leavers. And right now, and it's intended to stay 90 contact hours of CTE defines a CTE experience.
The other thing to be aware of in the CTE area, we're trying to collect this for both credit and non-credit CTE experiences as well, which is an important distinction when you start to think about how you're doing your data. We recognize that the CTE data for credit and non-credit is challenging to get, particularly in the non-credit. If you're doing that, sometimes it's challenging to do, but we think it's a very important part of what many of our colleges do is the non-credit CTE experiences. I think a good example I like to use is there are some states where you have 2 colleges side by side, both offering an EMT training, emergency medical technician training. One college is for credit, one college is not for credit. To talk about those as being different CTE outcomes is kind of, counting one, and if you're only doing credit doesn't make sense when both of them are doing a lot of substantial CTE training and work. So we're trying to capture those sorts of experiences on both the credit and non-credit side, and as we're going forward to talk about these, you'll see what some of these are about. But it's important as we define these cohorts to be aware that we are looking at credit and non-credit into the cohorts.
And then last but not least, ABE-GED. The outcomes here are pretty straightforward. Percent of students who complete. Do those students enroll in more education? Do they gain employment? But we try to make these definitions flexible enough so that institutions who provide ABE and GED and have to report either at the state level or federal level could give us feedback on how they're doing that, and the VFA could align with what they're already doing. Because I know that some outcomes are competency-based, and some reporting, therefore, is competency-based. So they're described in detail in the metrics manual. We did try to make room and allowances for that. It's an area that's changing a lot, and whether our community colleges provide it or not is also variant across states and institutions, which brings me to another point, CTE and ABE, but a lot with the CTE. Lots of institutions were like, I can't report this information, I can't report this, we don't have this data, what do I do? As with all the metrics in VFA, our working groups and the people who helped us develop it and the folks in the field tried to answer the question, what should we be measuring? So with CTE especially, a lot of the measures in there are a starting point or they're placeholders. We feel conceptually they're important to capture, but our institutions might not have the data available to do that. But it's a platform for them to work toward getting that data, and it's a platform for AACC and our colleges, on whole to advocate for data availability. Lots of states are doing stuff with the state longitudinal data systems. Other states are doing things directly with CTE. And so if we can have our framework defined and understand what it is that we want to collect and the information that we need to collect it, it gives us a stronger foothold to advocate for that data availability in those structures. I don't know, Chris or Gail, if you wanted to comment at all on the CTE stuff.
Well, I think at this point we should keep moving, but I think it is. We have, as you mentioned on ABE, not all the colleges are collecting non-credit data consistently. So I think there's an issue that we're going to have to grapple with, and I think I like what I like about this discussion is that you're saying that these are sort of the optimal circumstances, and this is what we should aspire to. And we can have discussions here in Michigan about what that means for us. But on the CTE front, the non-credit data will be a challenge because some just don't have it. So.
Great, thank you. And so with that, we're done with sort of that second level overview of the metrics. We have folks on the phone that we know have done VFA. We have folks on the phone that we know have, probably never even cracked the metrics manual, looked at the website. So we tried to be cognizant of all that and give you enough detail so you feel comfortable in getting started. With that being said, I'm going to skip bullet 1 and go back to it, but bullet 2 there, we have a webinar schedule posted online under news and webinars on our website, and that we have future webinars coming up where we take an even deeper dive at the cohorts and measures. It's really intended for those folks who have cracked the manual and started to do the data and need clarifications and need assistance. They're meant to be interactive and really user group oriented and help you to get through your specific questions and your challenges as you're doing VFA. So the leadership overview you won't need, and the new user overview you won't need. We went through a lot of that today. But this one here, the deeper dive, when you're ready, after you've done some data collection, I encourage you to sign up for one of those webinars. Also, last thing on resources, aside from the Data Help Center, we also want to encourage you to use the VFA email address. It helps us to route our questions. It helps us to know what are being frequently asked questions, so where we need to clarify and create a resource or edit a resource. And with that, I will stop talking. I want to open the floor to you guys for questions.
Bernadette, let me weigh in just a second on a couple of points that we've alluded to throughout. Our priority from MCCA right now is to really support the colleges to get the initial data submitted and meet the needs and answer questions along the way. And to that end, I mentioned that Gail Ives is on contract with us for a variety of projects, but this in particular, she's going to be a point person for us to work to answer questions and serve as a liaison to AACC and really try to be a resource for you within Michigan. Obviously, if you have questions, obviously very welcome to reach out to AACC directly. But we are going to do, as I mentioned, a meeting on January 22nd in the afternoon from 1 to 4 p.m. at the MCCA offices. This is the day before the next McCare meeting, that's why it's that afternoon. And really what we'd like to do with that meeting is build on this discussion from today. I encourage you to dig into the metrics manual and start to surface questions. We haven't totally nailed down the agenda, but in a broad sense what we want to do is we're going to have folks from AACC on the line to answer questions. We'd like to work with the beta colleges and sort of talk with them about their experience, not only in terms of the data submission, but how they're using the data. And depending on where we end up, we may also start a little bit of discussion about where we'd like to go from an association standpoint in leveraging the VFA in the longer term. But again, our priority is really thinking about helping you get the data submitted initially. So to that end, I would encourage, and we'll email you this the recording for this webinar, but I encourage you to be thinking about what your questions are, and we'll ask you for those in advance because we'll structure the meeting on the 22nd around the things that you have questions about. And so with that, I'll stop, but I think we stand ready to help. So let's
Chris,
sure.
We have a question from one of the participants, Cynthia. And she writes, will this reporting be impacted with the advent of Michigan community colleges beginning to offer bachelor degrees? So it shouldn't be impacted at all. One of the outcomes that we're capturing, the 6-year outcomes, is a receipt of the bachelor's degree. So if your institution offers bachelor's degrees and you're conferring them, your percentages will show in that outcome. If you don't offer bachelor's degrees, then it's, your percentage will be 0 in that outcome.
And then as we go forward, we're going to have to look at the question of whether reporting those at the 6-year time frame is sufficient, or we're going to need to look at something else for those bachelor's degrees. I know in some states, Florida, for example, students can't enter the bachelor's program until they earn an associate degree. So how they're treating those students, whether they're going to follow them from beginning to end or starting over when they enter the bachelor's program, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the Michigan model is going to be like, but I think it's something as we move forward with the VFA and more colleges start to do the baccalaureate, we have to think about the best ways to capture those and whether the 6-year outcome will be sufficient for that or not. But at present, we're not planning on changing the data collection timeline, the cohort length, for the bachelor recipient at this time.
Well, and Kent, this is Chris. I think it's an interesting question, and one of the powers of this collaboration around the VFA with you all and among all the colleges in Michigan is that we can have that discussion, because we haven't to this point really got into how are we articulating what's happening with those students. So I think it's a great question.
It's a nice segue into actually this, what do we mean by building a community of practice? We certainly never intended for VFA just to be another data collection tool that you have to go onto a website and enter information and sort of that's it. We want to build a community of practice not only to help you get data in, but to leverage the data in ways that are useful for you, to talk to your colleagues about what data is important and what the definitions of that data should be. And so to really build sort of a culture and a movement where this is your framework, this is the community college framework, and there's a community around it. And, as the VFA matures, that's certainly, we're at the very beginning stages of that, but it's very critical. So as it's maturing, we're trying to think of the best ways to do that, and certainly, meetings with your other with your state association and with your colleagues are one way, but also what are the ways we could tie it across states?
Absolutely. Bernadette, I actually had an email from somebody asking about that their college wasn't listed on the participating colleges list, and I just wanted to highlight for those of you, you have to formally join VFA through the process that Bernadette and Dawn described earlier for your college to be listed there. So, once you do that and you sign up and you provide your key contact, that's when your college's name will appear there. So I just wanted to highlight that because I'm sure there were others. I think there's, I forget, Dawn, 12 or 13 colleges that have signed up formally at this point. As I indicated, 27 of the 28 have said that they plan to sign up. Not all of them have actually gone through that process yet, but that's the direction we're headed.
Yeah, and so again, from the homepage, the Join Now area launches that process, and we hope it's pretty straightforward and intuitive. But again, the little bit of extra information you'll need is the discount code, which Chris sent out in his email, in order to process that correctly. And just a reminder that you are all college members. You're not multi-college members, even though this is being facilitated through MCCA.
And I just wanted to remind everybody, there's a little confusion with that discount code. You have to put it in the coupon code area. I just want to make sure that everybody is getting that discount. So put it, the code in the coupon code and hit apply, and that way make sure that you have the 30% discount.
And we can reiterate that. And if folks haven't seen the email that Dawn and Bernadette have referred to, it went to the presidents and with a copy to IR directors and CAOs, Chief Academic Officers. So if you haven't seen that, I would contact one of those folks at your campus. We're just trying to make sure that the information gets out, but sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle. So.
Yeah. It's easier for you to remember, the VFA email address. We could forward a copy of that information on to you.
Yeah. And finally, if you look at the screen, step 4 is purchase your VFA membership. I know that not everybody is going to be using a credit card to purchase VFA, but you can click that Bill Me Later. It's a checkbox in order to print an invoice and send a check via mail. But until you hit purchase VFA, you're not going to have an active membership.
Right, and just to reiterate, I mean, you won't be able to submit any data until you do this. So you definitely got to go through the formal membership sign-up process.
Yeah, and you'll hit My Account, and what you'll get is basically blank disabled screens. So.
Okay. So you guys seen any other questions?
I'm not seeing any questions, no.
Well, all right. Well, I think you guys did a great job of providing an overview of the measures. I think definitely encourage folks to take advantage of the existing webinars that AACC is doing on the VFA, those deeper dives on the metrics. But as I said, I just want to encourage you to please, one, I very much would like for folks to attend the meeting on the 22nd, but to make it of value, we really would like to hear from you about the questions you have, whether it be about the process, whether it be about the measures, how institutions are using them, what are the issues that you have in mind, and because we want to frame that discussion in the way that's most valuable to you. So we'll solicit that information via email as a follow-up to this webinar, but just encourage you to think about that and share that information with Gail and I as we think about that meeting.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I know it's a long time to pay attention, but hopefully you found it useful. Sorry again about the initial audio and that. I hope we didn't fluster you for the rest of the webinar. And that's it. We'll be sending up a follow-up email again to the email address at which you registered, and I'll have some follow-up information and also the materials from today.
So go get some eggnog and have some happy holidays.
Yeah, have a great
Right. Well, and I want to thank AACC for all their effort in getting this organized and all the work that they've done on the VFA. We're excited about the opportunity here in Michigan. So just want to thank everybody for participating and second the holiday cheer. So have a great holiday and a nice break, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.